Hello, everyone. This is the Climate Healers and Million Vegan Grandmothers podcast. And today I am privileged to have as our guest Chef Doreet of Elegantly Raw and Uncooked TV. And she's going to tell us all about eating raw vegan food. So without ado, I'm going to introduce her here, spotlight her.
Hi. So it's actually the On Cooking show. The TV is on Chained TV, and they get confused
Right.
a lot. Yes.
Okay. All right. So the first thing I want to ask you, Chef Doreet, and I know you have a presentation, but the first thing I want to ask you is why should we go raw? Because I didn't want to become a vegan until I was ready, and so I ignored all the information that was out there until I was ready. And then I watched a documentary that Dr. Silas Rao helped produce, and immediately I went vegan. And now I feel a little bit the same about being a raw vegan. So I want you to tell us why it's important to go raw.
Well, before I answer, can I ask you which, because he has several films, several documentaries. Which one did you see? Do you remember?
I saw What the Health.
Oh, that's the one that inspired you. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we should be going raw at all. I don't think people should, become vegans. I think we are vegans. I think we are actually in our natural state when we actually are functioning according to the laws of nature. We're all raw. Now, that said, however, Gabrielle, I think everything is raw. We don't need to cook anything because everything is already cooked for us. So, in other words, everything and nothing is raw because everything is already cooked by us. The universe didn't just throw us here willy-nilly and just said, now fend for yourselves. It gave us everything we needed, exactly how we needed it, in the form in which we needed it. Many different textures to appeal to us at all different times, different seasons, and every season brings forth a plethora of heavenly delights and treasures. And we ignore it. That's how we have been trained, is to ignore it. So we ignore our rawness. We ignore the fact that we are all plant-based. And we know that this is so because if you look at our dental biology in our mouth, you see that we actually have the mouth of a frugivore. And if we look at our own biology, at our digestive system, absorption and eliminatory system, it is that of a frugivore as well. So it's not even about going raw, it's simply returning to this natural state of who we already are. And I think when we tell ourselves, I must start eating a certain way or start eating certain things, what we're actually doing is setting up a parameter for ourselves that we more than likely will never achieve, or it's a false identity. Because what I think we need to do is go back to the truth of who we are. When we return to the truth of who we are, that's to our natural state, which is plant-based, which is really being a frugivore. Now, one of the things that appalls me, not just in the community at large, but even in this so-called vegan community, is that people cook fruits.
That's true.
Totally appalled by this. Fruits already been cooked for us. They could not be any more perfect. So when we cook them, we destroy everything about them that is there to give us, to delight us, to assist us in our healing, and also to help us rehydrate our bodies and ourselves. And so when we decide to do something, I think we need to stop looking at what it is we want to do and instead look internally and say, how can I develop my own internal life and lifestyle to meet the vibrational energy of that which I seek externally? Because everything in nature, in its raw form, in its own natural state, is of the highest vibrational energy possible. When we decide that we wish to leave behind functioning, living on a daily basis on a lower vibrational energy, we will automatically stop following and ascribing to what I call slaughterhouse cuisine. So naturally, we will start turning to the plant world. When we turn to the plant world, that's just the beginning of our journey. That's not the end and the be all of our journey. Because now we have to go beyond that and raise our vibrational energies now to a higher level to live out who we are, which are magnificent, miraculous beings who really have the power to heal ourselves on every level possible. Now, I don't just look at food to do that. I look at movement too, because I'm also a certified movement therapist. And as a movement therapist, I was a former dancer. And I look at injuries, for example, the same way that I look at food. What we call food in our society at large right now are things that are destructive, that have nothing to do with the human physiology, biology, and also our emotional state of being. And so we have what we hear a lot of people say, oh, we have so much mental illness now. We've always had mental illness from the moment that we started adopting slaughterhouse cuisine. We started really and truly entering into a very strong mental state of illness. Having ascribed to that, and then living our lives in such a manner, we end up with also emotional illness because we take on the emotions of the slaughterhouse and the way the animals have been captivated and the way that they have been sequestered and penned in and their freedoms have been taken away from them. So that's what we eat when we eat them. All of the agony and the misery that they go through, we end up taking on because we are, yes, what we eat.
Yes, we are.
So if we're eating anxiety and we're eating resistance of being slaughtered, we're going to become more resistant ourselves in our own lives. The thing is that we're not just resistant to the outer levels of human existence, but most of all become resistant to the magnificence of our own being, because we're functioning on a level of vibration that is the same level of vibration of slaughterhouses. We cannot rise above that until we let that go. So this is one of those questions, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So do we let that go first? Or do we meditate enough so we can get there? Because I also teach meditation. I used to teach with Deepak Chopra. I was trained by him. And one of the things that he teaches a lot and taught us was also Ayurvedic principles and Ayurvedic cuisine and the whole science of Ayurveda. And it's interesting because I also studied macrobiotics before I did that. And they all are about the same level of frequency, that we are living beings on a living earth, and that there's certain laws that really govern our lives here. When we go outside of those laws, then we develop different kinds of illness, mental illness, emotional illness, physical illness. We even develop something which I don't think most people really pay much attention to, and that's a great disconnection from life itself.
Mm-hmm.
And when we disconnect ourselves from life, which we do in many different ways, it can be using a cell phone, it can be eating things that we know do not have any at all resemblance to food, but we're going to eat it anyway because we're now addicted to it, because manufacturers have put addictive substances in it to addict, so we can be addicted. So I have had many people ask me, do I need to go raw? I'm going back to your question.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, no, nobody needs to do anything. We don't need to go anything. We just need to return to ourselves and the truth of who we are, the full magnificence of our being, and the full empowered beings that we are, and take our place in a society, in a world where we have everything in our bodies that mirror the other planets. So this body is actually its own planet. And if we treated it as such, we wouldn't need to ask these questions of, why should I do this?
Well, forgive my ignorance because you made a lot of sense. You really did. So I will remember that, and hopefully other people that watch this will take it to heart. But I did want to ask you a few other questions, maybe a little bit about your earlier life. I noticed on your website that you have been involved with, you have an impressive set of credentials, and you've done a lot of work with yoga in the Berkshires, which I have actually been to the Kripalu Institute. My daughter is a Kripalu taught yoga teacher, so I'm very familiar with that area. And they have the best vegan food there. Oh my gosh, that is so good. But back to you. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So when I was a child, I was fully empowered, as are all children, until it's beaten out of us, shouted out of us, humiliated out of us, shamed out of us, raped out of us. When we are at our most magnificent and our most powerful when we're babies. I mean, just think of it. What does a 2-year-old say the most?
Mama, Dada?
No. Constantly saying no.
Oh,
Says
yes.
no a lot.
Mhm.
One has to be very empowered in this world and has to know one's power to say no. And they say it constantly,
That's true.
constantly. That's a truly empowered being. And so how we treat children, I think, is so important. So as a child, I knew who I was. And I also knew that who I thought I was wasn't exactly who I was, because the I in me didn't really exist. We all of us were functioning at different levels of frequency, but we're pretty much the same being, just functioning at different levels of frequency. I didn't have the language skill, the linguistic skills to say that as a child. This is just something that I knew within my own being. I also knew that whatever attracted me the most, whatever really attracted me was what I needed. I only wanted to eat fruits. Fruits are the only thing that was really attractive to me. Fruits, the moon, and trees. Interestingly, not water. Later on, I understood the importance of water and I started getting attracted. But as a child, it was all fruits. And fruits has a lot of water. In fact, some of the fruits are mainly water. And so I would only eat fruits. Fortunately for me, I was in a very fruit-centric family, that we always had fruits growing in the garden and around the house. We always had a lot of fruit. However, the day came when I had to go to school. which I think is where all our problems begin.
Mhm.
And so I remember being held down, and I don't have a lot of memory of this. So I'm only going to speak about the things that I remember. Being held down by adults, big, and they seemed very big to me because I was teeny tiny, supposedly. I didn't feel tiny. I felt very big and powerful. And being held down to be inoculated, screaming and yelling. I was screaming like crazy, and they were telling me, you have to do this in order to go to school. You've got to be inoculated first. And I saw them take out this big syringe. Of course, I didn't know what the name of it was. This needle, I thought. And they brought it to me, and the closer it came, the more I screamed. And I'd never until then ever thrown a tantrum. Nobody in my family had ever seen me as a child throw a tantrum. Did I make up for it then?
I can imagine.
And I ended up in the hospital. I was violently sick. While I was in the hospital, I remember my father leaving and feeling so deserted in this huge room, long room. And remember, I was a child, so it looked very big to me. And so this is through my child's eyes, and I hear the moaning and the groaning of all these other women in the room. And I thought I was being deserted and left there because I loved fruits and I refused to eat anything but fruits. So I thought I was being punished.
Oh,
So that was my first perception of food being used as weapons, as a weapon. Because then came the hospital staff, and they were giving me all these strange things that I refused to touch. They gave it to me to eat and to drink, and I refused to touch any of it. I just wanted fruit, and I told them that, and they told me, no, you can't have fruit. It's too much sugar, which absolutely shocked me. Now remember, until that time when I was, and the reason why I got the inoculation, because I was school age, I had never been sick a day in my life, ever, ever. Got the inoculation, ended up in the hospital immediately. So you'd think they would say, well, what were you eating before? Why are you always so healthy? That your peers, your whole family would get sick from something. You never got sick. They did not see the link. And so I then decided that adults knew nothing. They were the most disempowered beings on earth, and they'd forgotten the truth of who they were. That was
amazing
the
that you came
lesson.
to that conclusion so young.
That was the lesson I learned from my childhood.
Mhm.
And I think many children come in with all of their being intact, and it's gradually and almost surgically removed from them little by little until they feel so powerless that when they become teenagers, they end up on drugs and they revolt and they rebel in so many different ways.
Mhm. Unfortunately, you're absolutely right.
And then we begin to introduce to children slaughterhouse cuisine. And we tell them it's normal. And this is what you need. And this is what you need to have. When everything in the child screams and yells, no, 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 but that child is no longer 2 years old. So no, it no longer has the impact that it did when we were 2 years old. And so there are many ways I think that we rebel as children. And then a lot of the things that are given to us to eat and drink happen to have additives in them, and they're very addictive. And so before one knows it, one becomes addicted to these substances. I cannot call them food, they are food-like substances. They are fake, they are taking the place of it. These are things that we have used, but we still call food today, to really hide behind or lack of feeling totally empowered and standing in our own truth of who we are. So that's what I learned from growing up.
Powerful lesson, very powerful lesson. And I think it's still true today that most adults don't know what they're doing. So Chef Doreet, you had a few things that you actually wanted to say in the interview. So, did you want to give us a little presentation?
So yes, so at COP 18, which I'm going to on Sunday, the 28th of July at 3 p.m. Los Angeles time,
No, no, 3 p.m. Eastern time.
or Eastern time. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle.
Yeah.
3 p.m. Eastern time, which is 12 noon on the Pacific coast of the United States and Canada,
Right.
of North America. I'm going to be giving a presentation and teaching people to make one of my absolutely favorite meals. Now, the name might turn you off a bit, but I call it a macadamia nut porridge. So I just finished writing an ebook. It's a coconut recipe book. It can be found on my website. And I'm actually going to continue writing that book to make it an actual physical book. So for the ebook, it's 20 recipes. So I'm going to add another 15 to 20 more recipes for the actual book, and it will be launching hopefully by October. And in this new book the book that I'm extending and writing right now, I have this recipe in several different forms because there are different ways that I've made it. Now, I've got to really say beforehand, I cannot take credit for it. There used to be a restaurant that was created by the Ingleharts. This was in Northern California. Jersey and Matthew Englehart created this restaurant, which is called Cafe Gratitude in San Francisco Bay Area. And it was all living foods. Everything was living foods. And that's where I first had this macadamia nut porridge, which just sent me into ecstasy. And when I left, I was on my way actually to a silent retreat up in Northern California. And all I could think of during the retreat, my silent retreat, was that porridge. So I was
Okay.
on the way back. I had to, to the airport, and in San Francisco, I had to stop off again. So unfortunately, that restaurant closed down. And then I never knew how to make it. And then a few years ago, I suddenly had this urge. I thought, I would love to have that macadamia nut porridge. Because Cafe Gratitude still exists, and it's now in Los Angeles too, but not, it's only plant-based now. It's no longer living foods, and they have nothing living foods on the menu. So, which is to me is very sad. And so I decided I was going to recreate it. And no matter what I did, I just couldn't get it to taste the way I remember it, because I remembered it vividly. It's the smell and the texture and the taste, because I eat with all my five senses, as do we all without realizing it, until we eat the stuff that we erroneously call food, and then the additives shut down our five senses when we eat. So we only eat for taste, because that's what the additives do. And I eat mindfully. So it's very important to me when creating something, anything at all, so even although I'm a frugivore again, that I will also create it as close to nature as possible. So it's not enough that it be living food, it must be minimally processed. And although a lot of people will make a lot of different foods and say, oh, this is raw vegan, this is unprocessed food, it's not true, because we process it in the blender or in a food processor, or we use a dehydrator, and we take out all of the moisture out of it. And that's why we can make pizzas and burgers and all these things for living foods. Anything that's made cooked, we can make it. But there is a price to pay. You're removing one of the basic elements, which is the hydrating part. So I decided I've got to recreate this thing. So I decided I need to give up and forget about recreating it, because no matter what I did, I couldn't get it. And then when I was fasting once, right in the middle of a fast, remember, when I first had it, I went on my silent retreat where I was also fasting. And all I could think of was this. So during this fast, all of a sudden, I knew exactly how to make it.
You had a revelation?
Uh-huh. but I was in the middle of a fast, so I couldn't exactly run out and get the ingredients. So the first ingredient is coconut. So this is a young Thai coconut, and it must be a young Thai coconut. You cannot use any other coconut. So this is what I'm going to be using for the recipe on the 20th of July, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 o'clock.
28th.
28th of July. Yes, thank you. And for the sweetener, most of people in the living foods movement for sweetener, we use many different things. I personally prefer to use dates.
Ooh, they look yummy.
Aren't they big and plump?
They look delicious, yes.
And the smell, oh, the smell, I wish we had smell-o-vision.
I have some in my pantry, so I will smell them afterwards.
And then, of course, I'm going to be using macadamia nuts, and I have other things I'm going to be using in there, but it's not very complicated at all. You're going to be surprised, but I do use a blender. And this is one of the few things that I do in the living foods movement where you don't have to have a powerful blender. Even a regular blender will do. Most things we do in the living foods movement, you need a powerful blender, meaning an expensive one, not this particular recipe. So anyone can make it. And I would love to hear people's feedback after they try it.
Oh, I'm sure you'll get lots of feedback. I'm sure you will. So are those the only 3 ingredients, or is there anything else?
There are other ingredients too. There's apple, and of course there are the spices. For me, I love nutmeg, and I also love real, not the fake or the one with the alcohol in the bottle. I love vanilla, but it's from the vanilla bean. But the vanilla bean is extremely expensive, and it dries up really fast. So I think for that Sunday, I'm going to make a vanilla paste instead, and use the vanilla paste because I want to make it easy for people watching to recreate it and still get very much the smell, the taste, the texture, the feel of it. Oh, it's the sound of it, the sound of it. See, I told you I eat with my 5 senses. I eat for sound. The great thing about living foods is that your sound, you begin to hear your food.
Really, I've never noticed that, but I'm going to start paying attention.
Well, take a carrot and bite on it.
Oh, that kind of sound. Yes, sure.
Take a celery, and they all have different vibrational sounds, by the way. The vibrational sounds for each of them is different. Take a celery and chew it. This porridge, you'll be listening and hearing the different sounds as they come together as well.
And of course, the macadamia nuts.
Oh, la, la, la. The texture, yes, yes. And the texture too. The macadamia brings about something to it that is purely magical. But remember, the macadamia must be alive. It cannot be roasted ever.
Okay. All right.
It's like taking it to the lowest level possible, and it doesn't taste the same anymore. Everything has to be alive.
Okay.
So it's very expensive macadamia nuts that are not roasted or cooked or depleted in any way. And then to find with macadamia nuts too that are pretty fresh is very difficult. It's not easy, especially in certain seasons. So it becomes quite expensive recipe. So some people might be saying to me, now I've gotten addicted to this, you need to start paying my food bills. Trying to say this to
me. Well, or maybe we don't make it every day. We just make it, once in a while.
It's for special occasions, I think. It is definitely special occasions. I do it when I have visitors. But because it's such an expensive thing to make, and you have to use, like for example, if I'm just making 1 cup, I'll just use 1 coconut. But coconuts, young Thai coconuts are pretty expensive right now. Have you seen the prices?
I have not.
Here, they're about $6 each, just for 1 coconut. But that's the least expensive I can find them now. Most of them are between $8 to $9 right now each. So it is an expensive recipe and it's going to be so worth every single cent that you pay for it.
You know, you're making me so excited about this. In fact, just the way that you talk about it is making my mouth water. So I'm really looking forward to your presentation on July 28th. And so we're going to wrap this up. Is there any final words you have for us, or maybe a short story, a gratifying story you want to tell us?
Yeah, I think that we need to pay attention to our children. And I
Hmm.
say our children. You don't have to be a father or mother to have to say our children, because every children really, we are every child's parent, family. As a grown up, supposedly a grown up, as a so-called adult, every child is in, we need to really pay attention to them because they still come bearing the truth of who we are. We can learn so much from them. I think instead of trying to teach children, we need to just listen to them. I love the educational system in the school in Indonesia called the Green School. I love the educational system of Finland and of Denmark. In Finland, where they take them out into the forest. This is part of the classroom, is the forest. The classroom is the forest. And then they just let them go loose and discover the forest themselves. And in Denmark, they have days where they take them to a place where there's like a river or if it's been raining, where there's a lot of mud, and they just have them jump into the mud and enjoy being muddy and filthy dirty.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds great. Well, and as you know, I mean, we're doing this podcast for the Million Vegan Grandmothers as well as climate healers. Although MVG, Million Vegan Grandmothers, is a part of climate healers, but our podcasts are separate. And I just wanted you to know that, you know, you're always welcome to come to the MVG meetings. We actually have them every Wednesday night tonight at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. And that's for anyone who's listening. And you don't have to be a grandmother. You can be a grandfather, or you can be an elder, or you can be anyone who's interested in the future of our children and grandchildren. We don't discriminate age in any way. We would love to have anyone who has the same fierce love for children of all species that we do.
How
So
delightful.
yes. So, Chef Doreet, we are so looking forward to your presentation and to the Vegan Convergence of the Peoples, VCOP number 18, coming up July 27th and July 28th. It's a weekend. Registration is free on the climatehealers.org website or by donation if you feel inclined to do that. So please do register because you will need a special link to get in. And otherwise, you can watch for free and a little bit delayed on YouTube and Facebook. So, okay, Chef Dorit, it's lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Gabrielle.